All right, Anatomy Physiology. Here is the presentation of our joints, just in case we're not here or you missed. So this is the lecture that I did in class. So joints or articulations, these are where two bones meet, and we've kind of already talked about these before. And so when we talk about these, the functions, movement, hold skeleton together, and they're classified by either fibrous, cartilaginous, or synovial. The fibrous being sutures, cartilaginous would be things like in the rib cage, and then the vertebrae, and then synovial, they're freely movable. So there's your fibrous joint. So there's some example. There's no movement. These tend to be like the sutures. So the bones of the skull held together by connective tissue, and then also between the teeth and the jaws. And so here's some more examples. The cartilaginous joints, these are bones united by cartilage, and these are located at the epiphyseal plates, the rib and sternum, and the pubic symphysis. So again, these ones have a little bit more movement. And then we get into the synovial. Let me move my face here. These are bones that are separated by a fluid containing a joint cavity. And so we talk about synovial, we need to talk about synovial fluid, menisci, and then bursa. And the whole point of all these is just to reduce friction. So I wrote this on the board, is that you may just want to write the idea that these both reduce friction. I'm going to try to write on this if it'll let me. So let's see what happens here. Down here at the bottom, reduce, it's friction. Maybe I'll try to. So I would add this idea that it reduces friction. So, all right, we'll erase that. Okay, so there's those synovial joints, reduce friction. And then we talk about that. So there's a lateral meniscus, which you've probably heard of before. There's a torn meniscus, and the tear, as you can see where the arrow is. And then again, there's your bursa, which this is the subcutaneous prepatellar bursa, which is on the front of the knee. So let's talk about types of synovial joints. These are going to be the joints that you're going to be you're going to pick one of these joints, one of these 6 joints is what you're going to be building your model of. And so plane, hinge, pivot, condyloid, saddle, ball and socket. So these are one of the 6 that you're going to be selecting from. And so pick the one that you feel most comfortable with. And we did a paper in class, so get that from somebody. So again, there's some examples here, 6 types of joints. And so again, structure determines function. So plane, joint right here, not a whole lot of movement. So there's the plane, hinge, which is like the knee, the knee and the elbow. We've got the ball and socket. You've got a saddle joint. You've got the pivot, and then you have the ellipsoid. So these are your options for joints. And so I got a new pen to try out, and you guys are my beta group as well. So I'm not too worried about these if you know which ones are non-axial, uniaxial, biaxial, or multi-axial. So this is just showing you the differences there. All right, there's a type. So let's talk about these movements. And so we talk about the joint movements. Every skeletal muscle attached to a bone or connective tissue at 2 or more points. And so the 2 terms that you really need to know here are the origin and the insertion. And so origin is attached to movable, insertion is attached to, origin is immovable right there. The origin, again, is on the immovable part, and the insertion is on the muscle that moves. And so if we look here, the insertion always moves towards the origin. So if you think about on your elbow or on your arm here, here's a bicep, right? Bicep flexion. So the humerus is not moving. That's the attach point. The ulna and radius are moving. So the origin is here on the humerus. The insertion is on the ulna and radius. So the insertion is moving towards the origin. So let's erase that. Click out of that. So types of synovial movements. Again, the gliding, the key point there is at the wrist. Flat bones, they slip past one another back and forth between vertebrae, wrists, and ankles. And these are your gliding, which would be your plane. Angular movements, in terms of the angular movements, these increase or decrease the angle. So what I did in class, and what I would have you probably do, is kind of bracket these. So this is a flexion and extension, tend to go together. So the flexion will decrease the angle between the bones. And so when I think of flexion, I'm going to write the bicep. So the bicep is a good example of a flexion extension. So the bicep flexion decreases the angle, extension angle along a sagittal plane. So a flexion extension go together. The next two that I usually put together are abduction and adduction. So abduction, you move away from the midline. Adduction, you move towards the midline. So I usually use the arm. And then a circumduction is this idea of doing this whole rotation. So and there's just some more movements. There's your flexion, angle between the bone. There's some hinges extension, hyperextension. There's a hyperextension of the knees there, but we've got hyperextension, hyperflexion. Some more movements. Again, abduction, adduction, circumduction. There's another video over these. We'll do these in class. Rotation, again, is just turn along axis. So the hip, shoulder. So C1 and C2 are good examples of a rotation. Some other special movements, supination, pronation. I have a whole separate video on these, but supination, supple, sup, so supination, excuse me. So bones are parallel anatomical position. So this is supination, right? Pronation is down. So supination and pronation. Elevation, depression. Elevation of the scapula is up. Depression is down. You can also do that with the jaw. And then inversion, eversion. There's a whole other separate video on these, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. And then dorsiflexion and the plantar flexion. Again, dorsiflexion, toes pointing up. Plantar flexion, toes pointing down. So dorsiflexion is you roll back up on your heel, so like you're stretching them out, and the plantar flexion is you go down on your toes. Protraction, retraction, jaw. So you can see those arrows. Let me move my face again. It's in the way. Oops, we'll just kind of put it over here, whatever. It looks like she's yelling at me. And then opposition with the thumb. So that's where we're going to stop. That was just to kind of give you a quick overview of all the movements and stuff that we're going to do this week. So again, hope you found this helpful. Again, this was for those of you that weren't here. This is me signing off from 102. Hope this is helpful, and I will catch you either in class, online, or in another video. Have a good one. This is me signing off.